In our first application we created in the course, we created a Hello World app, which allowed us to, when trigger a button, display a certain piece of text that preset within the label, as you can see here. So I press the button and it simply displays Hello World. Now that was creating our first application, and we're going to build upon that to add more functionality and learn more different features around developing applications. So what we're going to do in this lecture is talk about the different ways we can display text. It's not just getting it triggered to display within the label. There's also other different ways on how we can do it. So back within our project of our Hello World application, we're going to jump into the main.storyboard. Now we've already touched upon one way of displaying text, such as pressing a button and then it displays it within the label. But there's also other ways of doing it. So what I'm going to do is copy our label, copy and paste it there. Now make our next one a little bit smaller. To be honest, I'll make them all a bit smaller so we can fit them all on the screen. So one there. Place this one underneath. And we'll add in a third one. Okay. So initially they've all got the word label preset within them. The first label, which currently has our connection of label on it, displays text when the button is triggered. The second one is going to work in a different way. This one's going to have text preset on it when the view loads up. So when the view loads up, we can code it to have text already loaded up on it. So to do this, we need to add another label or another kind of connection to, or another outlet to that label. So click the Files owner. We're going to bring up our assistant editor. There we go. You see we've already got our label placed in there for our first one. So we control click or right click and drag over our second label. And we'll name this one label 2. And add that in. Now we're not going to add on for the third label, as we won't be using code to display text within that one. So let's go back to our standard editor and then jump into our view controller.swift. So as we have our first label displaying Hello World for when the button is triggered, we're going to have our second label display text again in the same way, using the same type of code, but in a different kind of function. So here we have this override function called the view did load. All code placed in between these two quotation marks gets performed when the view loads up. So as soon as it loads up, it all gets triggered for what's been placed within it. So what we could do is type out label 2, which is the new name or the new outlet for our new label or our second label. And we do .text, looks like we've done in the function button down below. And this is going to equal 2 quotation marks I displayed when the app loaded. There we go. And this time if you go to build and run, and you'll initially see when the simulator first loads up our application, it displayed I displayed when the app loaded. It's already there. It's not been placed within the label on our interface builder. It's all performed when the application first loads up. And again, we can press our button and it still does the same function. But what happens if what I display within it is too long for the label? For example, if you jump back into our main.storyboard, it's a pretty wide label anyway, but what if the text is too long for the size of the label? So if I adjust it here and put that back in the center and build and run again, you'll see that it will kind of change it a bit. It cuts off what we fully display. So now it says I displayed when ... meaning there's more text to display, but it couldn't quite fit it in the label. Now the great thing about UI labels is we can change how they kind of interact with the content being displayed within them. So I'm selecting on the label, going to go to the attributes inspector, and we have this great thing called our auto shrink. Now by default it's fixed to the font size. So if I select it, we can set a minimum font scale and font size. So I'm going to select a minimum font scale, which means it can go 50% below its current font size. So if I select it to 1, it will simply stay the same, which at the moment it's selected to 33. So if it was at by default, which was selected at 0.5, it means it could go down to what's half of 30, 16.5, I believe. So it's going to around to about 16 kind of in our font size. So again, if we build and run, I'm not sure if that's going to be small enough, but you will see a dramatic change. So okay, that is small enough. So it's because when it gets displayed in, it knows that the label was well, kind of the text within the label was too long to be displayed in the label size. So what it does is simply adjust the label's size it's being displayed within the text to fit it all in. So we've allowed it to go down to basically half of the original size. So what I could do is scale it up a little bit more. So let's go for, it can only go down a quarter of its original size. And again, this may be a bit, well, basically not enough, but you can see how it adjusts there. So originally it only went to I display when ... So now I display when the app ... So that's a great way to add in there. So if you're working with dynamic text that gets displayed, well, different type of text or different lengths gets displayed within a label within your application, you can then adjust the minimum font size. Now, you don't always want to allow it to go down to about 50%. You can set a minimum font size. So at the moment it's at 33. I can set it so I don't want it to go below any smaller than 22 in terms of its font size. So this way you can keep a control of how it works, because sometimes, even though that's not enough, if you've got all this text being displayed and it's going down to 50%, or you're allowing it to go down to 50%, you can have different font sizes all over the place. So you can set a kind of bottom line to what you can basically go down to, which is great when we add in our applications. So obviously 22, I believe I set to there, is not enough, so I set it down to, let's go for 20. This may be perfect for it. So when it loads up, again, no. So it may actually have to go down to around about 50% anyway. So we finally get that set up and see if this one finally works to 18%. Okay, well, not 18%, the 18 in terms of size. So it perfectly displays. So we can display the text within the label when the application first loads up, and we can get the label to adjust it to make sure it fits in all the time. Now, one more thing we need to talk about is what happens if we don't want it to minimize all the way down. For example, what if I want my app or my label to simply be stuck at 25 in terms of size, or maybe 75%, and I don't want it to go any lower than that? Now, another great thing we can do is add lines. So by default, we have selected to have one line. If I up that, now I've already set the minimum font size to be a bit larger, so it will force it to go on a second line. So when it builds and runs, you can see now it says I displayed when the app loaded on 2 lines. So this is great for if you don't want it to go really small like we had done before. We can add lines in as many as we want. So again, the text is dynamic in terms of how it gets displayed in the label. We can adjust it to display it how we want. Okay, so the third thing we're going to talk about is displaying our text, and this is not going to revolve around code at all. So we've got our first way of pressing a button which then displays text within our label. We've got our second way which displays text within our second label when the view first loads up, but we can also display text within the label without any code whatsoever. And that's just very simple. Select our third label, double click on it, and you can add your own text in, or select the text section at the top. So I can put hello, and it simply changed it there. So that's a simple third way. You don't have to have it all preset to text. So if you do have labels that you know that you're not going to have the text change within it, and it's going to stay the same no matter what happens in the app, then it's another way forward for doing it. So again, we go to build and run, and you'll finally see that our third label displays the word hello, which has been pre-configured within the interface builder, and our button displays hello world. So there we go. That's talking about different ways we can display text within our application and how we can control it within the labels themselves, where if the text is too big in the label, we can reduce it to minimum font size or the minimum scale size we'd like to go down to, and how to add it onto multiple lines within the label itself. Next, we're going to talk about how we can add in our user's own pieces of text by adding them to our UI text fields.